Every week, the Payne family cuts straight to the real financial story.
The one question, Bob, everyone's asking is, are we in an artificial intelligence bubble? You've been through boom and bust. What do you think?
No hype, no myths. Just what actually matters to your money.
Does feel very similar to what we experienced in the 90s. Where are we, though? Are we in 1995, 1997, 1999?
Listen to the Pain Points of Wealth on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
The Roger Stone Show on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Welcome back to the Roger Stone Show. You may be familiar with Congressman Eric Swalwell, a virulent critic of President Trump. He unfortunately got caught having an extramarital affair with a communist Chinese spy named Feng Feng. He penetrated her and she penetrated his office with an intern. The problem with that, of course, is that he had access as a member of the House Intelligence Committee to classified documents that, according to the Biden Department Inspector General, he and his BFF, Adam Schiff, both leaked illegally to try to smear President Donald Trump. More recently, the fact, first of all, that Pelosi would not remove him from the Intelligence Committee, given his being compromised by a red Chinese spy from China. This is a guy who called me a Russian communist spy for years with no real proof of that. He also leaked my classified testimony in violation of both the law and House rules. And he worked hand in glove with Robert Mueller in order to set up a bunch of gotcha questions where I did, in fact, make misstatements to the House Intelligence Committee under oath. On the other hand, none of those statements were material, which is required under the law. I just didn't have a fair judge or a fair jury, and my lawyers were very adept at proving that I had no motive to lie. To lie covering up what? The Russian collusion? There was none. The WikiLeaks collaboration? None of that either. In fact, on page 178 of Robert Mueller's long-hidden, long-redacted final report, which we only know of today because a federal judge ordered him to release it, and they released it on midnight of Election Day in 2020, the busiest media day of the year, to make sure no one covered it. Mueller found no evidence against me regarding Russian collusion, WikiLeaks collaboration, or any other crime. Joel Gilbert was a strong and valued supporter during that fight for my life. But more than that, he's an extraordinary investigative journalist and documentary filmmaker. His film about Danny Williams, the black son of Bill Clinton, and Bobby Ann Williams, a sadly drug-addicted prostitute, which is available on YouTube, Banished, the Danny Williams story, Danney, an extraordinary piece of very effective and completely truthful filmmaking. He's also did major work exposing Kamala Harris's record of abuse. And as I say, he was one of the earliest critics of Letitia James. He teamed up with our good friend Sam Antar, another great investigative reporter, to ferret out a 43-year history of serial mortgage fraud. Letitia James was indicted in the Eastern District of Virginia for crimes that she herself has prosecuted people in New York State for. And it's a documents crime, which means she signed a document under oath, wasn't checking a box, wasn't a form document, a specific document, which she claimed that she would be a Virginia resident and she would get a lower interest rate and insurance rate and a tax break because she was not a New York State resident. But you can't be the Attorney General of New York if you're a registrant of Virginia. Anybody else would be prosecuted for that crime. That just touches the tip of the iceberg when it comes to Letitia James. But Joel Gilbert, one of the best journalists in the country, exposing numerous problems with Letitia James' record of criminality. But now he is among the first in the country to figure out that Eric Swalwell not only made misrepresentations in his mortgage, but in those misrepresentations, he reveals the fact that even though he is now openly and legally a candidate for governor of California, he's not really eligible to be governor of California. Joel Gilbert, welcome to the Roger Stone Show.
Hey, Roger, great to be here, and that's a good summation because Eric Swalwell swore in his mortgage documents in Washington, D.C. that it would be his primary residence. He did that in order to get the lowest interest rates possible. But the California Constitution says in order to run for governor of California, you have to be a resident of the state for 5 years prior to the election. So either Swalwell is guilty of mortgage fraud in Washington, D.C., or he's ineligible to run for governor. He can't have it both ways. And I actually have been covering this, and I filed a petition with the state of California to force the Secretary of State to disqualify Swalwell as ineligible because he has no address in California. He perjured himself on his candidate statement, his official candidate statement number 501 that he was required to file. He used his attorney's address for his home address, which you can't do. So I'm looking to see him disqualified, and I have a petition currently before the state of California to get him disqualified.
Joel, technically, who in California at this point makes that decision?
The Secretary of State is required by law to enforce the California state election law. So I'm asking the court, I have a judge named Shelley Ann Chang, who seems to be a straight-up judge in Sacramento, who's presiding over this case, and we're going to have a hearing. I've applied to get a hearing very soon, and in that hearing, I'm hoping and expecting she will order the Secretary of State to do her job, and we're going to see how it plays out.
Swalwell's abode in Washington, D.C., kind of a swanky six-bed mansion valued at $1.2 million, a kind of swish property for a guy who continues on his financial disclosures to show enormous credit card and college debt.
Yeah, he's got serious financial issues. Number one, he cashed out his pension from when he used to be a California prosecutor in Alameda County. That's a big red flag for a younger person to cash out a pension. He still owes $100,000 on his student loans. He still owes $100,000 in credit cards. Nothing has changed in 14 years in Congress. He's been making $174,000 a year, but he hasn't paid down his debt, and he can't afford, obviously, to own a home in California. Now, if you contrast this, I looked at Maxine Waters, of all people. Maxine Waters has a home in Los Angeles, and on her mortgage document in Washington, D.C. for her condo, she says it's going to be her second home. So she pays a higher interest rate because she tells the bank it's her second home. So she actually is eligible if she wanted to run for governor of California. Swalwell,
even though her California resident, I think in very Tony Hancock Park, is not in the extraordinarily poor district she represents.
No, absolutely not. But she technically would be eligible, whereas Swalwell has no home in California, no rental, never owned property, and he only owns this home in Washington, D.C. And when you look at his financial mess, you understand why he can't afford to have a home in California. And I actually went to his town hall. He held a town hall in Santa Monica High School last Friday. And I went there. He said it would be a 2-hour town hall. He said, you can ask me anything. Swalwell came around and shook everybody's hand. I wasn't expecting that. He looked me in the eye. I shook his hand. I said, thanks for coming. He said, nice to meet you. And I could see kind of a panic in his eyes. And then he went up and only took 6 questions. After 20 minutes, he cut off the town hall. And I got in line to take a photo with him so I could ask him a question during the photo session. And 3 of his goons came up to me and said, what's your plan? I said, to take a photo. They said, we're not going to allow that. And they forced me to leave. So Swalwell, I think he's kind of a wannabe tyrant. I think he plans to become governor of California and lead a anti-Trump insurrection. And then I think he wants to run for president. That's what I see him doing, because he's staking out all these far left positions. He knows that if he runs for governor as a Democrat, he knows that if you win the primary, you automatically become governor because it's a one-party state. So he's staking out these far left positions because he knows the people that vote in the primaries are the far left activists. So I've got him figured out. That's exactly what he's up to.
Yeah, he faces a very, I would say, influential field. Democratic Congresswoman Katie Porter. who has some of the weirdest eyes I've ever seen. I saw a video of her recently talking about how her daughter cried the night Trump was returned to the presidency because, well, what would happen if she needed an abortion and she couldn't get one? She lost the Senate race to Adam Schiff, although she's a protege of the Senator Elizabeth Warren of Massachusetts, and she's a very prodigious fundraiser. Former Los Angeles Mayor Antonio Villaraigosa trying to make a political comeback. Latinos are very, very important within the California electorate, both in general elections and within the Democrat primary. Of course, Republican Steve Hilton is running. California has this odd, what they call jungle primary system, which the parties no longer have party primaries, but that every candidate who wants to run, both Republican, Democrat, or independent, anybody who can get on the ballot runs in one-time primary, and then the two top vote getters face off against each other. So, God forbid you could actually have a choice between Eric Swalwell and Katie Porter. God forbid. Although Swalwell, it takes enormous amounts of money. It's an extremely expensive state to run in, very expensive media markets. I don't, even if Swalwell survives this legal challenge to his being on the ballot, which frankly, now that Joel Gilbert is focused on it, I don't think he will. I think he faces a very, very uphill race. How would you contrast his situation with what we know about the guy for whom he is the Sancho Panza, Adam Schiff? Remember Adam Schiff? He's the guy who said repeatedly that he had seen more than circumstantial evidence of Russian collusion with Donald Trump's campaign, and then never produced any whatsoever. And then when pressed about that, he said, well, Trump's campaign manager, Paul Manafort, shared polling information with a Russian intelligence asset named Konstantin Kilimnik, and there's your Russian collusion. Problem with that is that Kilimnik was a U.S. intelligence asset, as the independent independent journalist Matt Taibbi has proven, but also as the documents, the declassified documents from our embassy in Kyiv prove. So they turned up nothing of the kind. But Adam Schiff has some issues regarding his mortgages, as I recall.
Correct. Look, let me tell you about Eric Swalwell. He said in this town hall, he said his mentors in Congress are Nancy Pelosi and Adam Schiff. Those are his two BFFs in Congress. He's not a very smart guy. He speaks in cliches. All he does is give these little cliches. He's not a good speaker. He doesn't have much of a personality. But he, puts on this 2-day-old growth beard, and he uses a lot of curse words. He likes to curse. He thinks that makes him look hip or cool.
A lot of dropping the F-bomb. Yeah, I've noticed that.
Yeah, and so I think he's identified, look, a lot of far-left radical activists are the ones that come out for this Democrat primary. Those are the ones I want to appeal to. I can get that vote, and then I'll become governor, because the Democrat always becomes governor. But he is under investigation. Bill Pulte from the FHFA referred him to the Department of Justice for mortgage fraud. If he insists that he lives in California, he's guilty of mortgage fraud in D.C. because he got the lowest interest rate by saying it was his primary residence. I think there's a great chance he gets disqualified because he hasn't lived in California for 10 years, and you have to be a resident of the state for 5 years prior to an election. But Swalwell has definitely cast himself as a Bernie Sanders, radical, far-left socialist to get power. And that's a very dangerous person who really has no ethics, no basis, no experience in life except for trying to get power. And that's what he's up to right now.
I don't think we can just forget his dalliance with the Russian spy Feng Feng, who infiltrated his office and with whom he had an extramarital affair when he was a member of the House Intelligence Committee. Well, I'm sure she wasn't interested in him for his studly good looks. The guy is getting style tips from Steve Bannon, from what I can say. Right. I mean, he rarely looks like he's bathed. Let me tell you about the Fang Fang thing. Look, this Chinese woman shows up at the University of California. She looks 10 years older than any other student. She's definitely an older person, and she becomes the president of all these different organizations, and she starts warming up to different
politicians. She clearly targeted Swalwell because he was an up-and-comer, because he was on the House Intelligence Committee and in charge of CIA funding. And he places an intern in her office. That's what intelligence assets do. They try to infiltrate the person's operation. Don't forget, Dianne Feinstein had a driver for 20 years who was a Chinese spy. We have pictures of Fang Fang with that driver. So Swalwell is very problematic even as a congressman, let alone becoming governor. But I believe that he wants to become governor so he can lead this anti-Trump insurrection and then run for president. I have no doubt that that's his plan.
All right, we're talking to Joel Gilbert, who has reported this story, big story today in the UK Daily Mail, based on the actions by Joel Gilbert and to knock Eric Swalwell off the ballot. A little more with our friend Joel Gilbert when we come back to the Roger Stone Show. Welcome back to the Roger Stone Show. We're still talking to the documentary filmmaker and investigative journalist Joel Gilbert. Joel, how can people follow you on social media?
I'm at Joel S. Gilbert on Twitter, X, Joel S. Gilbert. I'm posting every day about Swalwell, covering him in the Gateway Pundit. Daily Mail's picking up the story. Hopefully Fox and New York Post and others will pick it up too. And all my films are available highway61ent.com for entertainment, highway61ent.com, and keep checking the Gateway Pundit. I put up articles there, seems like a couple times a week. There's a lot more to come on Swalwell. I just got started.
The other great thing about Joel Gilbert is he's a very accomplished musician, and he fronted a Bob Dylan tribute band for many years. He's an extraordinary musician, a performer, and like me, a devotee to Bob Dylan. Of all of Dylan's periods, what was your favorite period, Joel?
Look, I think favorite or most fascinating is his religious period. He, grew up in a small town, Minnesota, Jewish, and he got caught up in the Jesus movement in Hollywood in the late 70s, and he made 3 religious albums, including the Grammy-winning Slow Train Comin', Gotta Serve Somebody, and it's really fascinating how he just found all these stories in the Bible and decided to write about them, and how he took on a whole new audience of Christians and evangelicals with what I think today stands as some of his best work, the religious music that he put out for 3 years.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of that, although I would say Blood on the Tracks could still be my favorite album. And my all-time favorite, the story of New Jersey boxer Hurricane Carter. Well,
I actually, I met the Hurricane. I interviewed him, and I was the only person to ever interview him for one of my films on Bob Dylan. I can tell you a lot of people don't like to hear it, but he actually was very guilty. He really did murder those 4 people. And he had so much charisma, he actually was able to talk his way out of prison and convince Bob Dylan to write this song about him being innocent. But even Dylan found out later that Hurricane Reuben Carter was guilty, and he never sang that song again after 1977 when he realized that he'd been had and that Reuben Carter was a murderer.
That's amazing. So I guess an apology is owed to the Paterson, New Jersey police, who they falsely claimed set Reuben Hurricane Carter up. I also have to be a fan. I liked the very early material, the earliest material, the Greenwich Village coffee scene material, his breakthrough songs, Blowing in the Wind, We Shall Not Be Moved, and so on. Bob Dylan. Yeah,
for the Freewheelin' album, Times Are a Changin', and Another Side of Bob Dylan, he really wrote about the protest movement with Blowing in the Wind, Times Are a Changing. He really led it with his music. And then he kind of moved on. He was really good at writing about what was going on around him. If it was the religious movement in L.A., he wrote about Jesus. If it was the protest movement in the 60s, he wrote about that. So he was kind of an interpreter of what was happening around him, but he never wanted to lead a movement or to become a social figure. That was for Joan Baez and people like that who wanted to lead a movement of protest. Dylan just liked to write about it and then move on.
I don't think he did this for commercial purposes, but but he reinvented himself, and his music changed. He also changed, and of course, there was scandalism in the folk community when he went electric at the Newport Jazz Festival, a folk festival.
Well, what people don't know is Dylan was a rock and roller in high school. When he was in high school, he had bands. And he only got into folk music because he fell in love with Woody Guthrie and started singing all these Woody Guthrie songs. He was kind of a Woody Guthrie jukebox for a couple of years. And then he really went back to the electric music, which was really his roots.
All right, we got to leave it there, I'm afraid. Thanks for joining us today on The Roger Stone Show.
Thanks for listening to The Roger Stone Show. You can hear The Roger Stone Show Sunday afternoons at 3. If you like the podcast, share it with your friends and listen anytime at WABCRadio.com and download the WABC Radio app. Hit that subscribe button on all major podcast platforms. Plus, follow WABC on social on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and X. See you next time for a new episode so you never have to wonder.
What the heck is going on here?
Every week, the Payne family cuts straight to the real financial story.
The one question, Bob, everyone's asking is, are we in an artificial intelligence bubble? You've been through boom and bust. What do you think?
No hype, no myths. Just what actually matters to your money.
Does feel very similar to what we experienced in the 90s. Where are we, though? Are we in 1995, 1997, 1999?
Listen to the Pain Points of Wealth on the Red Apple Podcast Network.